The night sky of the alien world was painted with 3 pale moons. Strange blue mist rolled across the ground, glowing faintly as if the soil itself held secrets. The human explorer, Captain Harris, stood near the wreck of his shuttle. He had been stranded for 2 days. Supplies were low, but his spirit was strong. He believed he could survive until rescue came. He checked his small fire, warming a pack of food. The flames crackled softly, giving him comfort in this lonely, silent land. But suddenly, something moved. A shadow flickered at the edge of his vision. He froze, his hand tightening on his tool. Then, quick as lightning, a small figure darted forward. Harris barely had time to blink before the pack of food was snatched from his side. His eyes widened. It was not a beast. It was not a soldier. It was a child. The child was thin, bones showing under pale green skin. Its large dark eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight. It looked at him for one short second, eyes filled with fear and hunger. Then it ran. Harris jumped to his feet. His first instinct was anger. That food was his only supply. Without it, survival would be harder. But his second thought was confusion. Why would a child steal from him? And why was it so thin, so desperate? The child stumbled as it ran, clutching the stolen food against its chest. Harris could hear its ragged breath, almost like a whisper of pain carried through the mist. For a moment, he hesitated. He could let the thief go. It was only 1 pack of food. But something inside him stirred curiosity. And maybe even compassion. He picked up a small light and began to follow. The alien ground was rough and uneven. Jagged stones rose like teeth. Strange plants reached out with glowing tendrils. The night was alive with soft, eerie sounds. Harris moved carefully, keeping the child in sight. The figure was fast but weak, stumbling often. Each stumble told Harris the same story. Hunger, exhaustion, desperation. The chase led him further from his shuttle, deeper into the misty land. His human mind kept asking questions. Why was a child alone here? Where were its people? Was this a trap? Suspicion hung in his thoughts, but so did another question: what kind of world lets a child starve? At one point, the child turned its head. Their eyes met again. The look was sharp, part fear, part plea. It was the look of someone fighting for survival, not for greed. Then the child hurried on, disappearing behind broken stone pillars. Harris slowed down. His heart pounded, but not from the chase, from something deeper. He remembered Earth. He remembered children in ruined cities during the wars, children hiding behind walls, stealing bread just to live another day. That memory was a wound, and now, on this alien world, it had opened again. The explorer reached the fallen pillars and stopped. Silence hung heavy, broken only by his breathing. He lifted his light and saw faint tracks in the dust, small, uneven steps. The child had gone further inside. He followed the trail. The air grew colder. The mist pressed against him, making every shadow look alive. He tightened his grip on the light. Somewhere ahead, he heard a cough, a weak, broken sound, not from the child, but from someone else. Harris froze. His skin prickled. He knew he was close. The child's figure appeared again, just for a moment. It pushed through a narrow crack in the rocks, vanishing into darkness. Harris stood at the entrance, staring into the unknown. He could turn back, could return to his shuttle, keep his remaining supplies, and wait for rescue. That would be the safe choice, but his curiosity burned stronger than fear. Something told him the theft was not the end of the story, it was only the beginning. He stepped into the crack, his light cutting through the shadows. The passage was narrow, the walls rough with alien markings, as if an old civilization had once carved symbols into the stone. The air smelled damp, carrying the faint trace of sickness. Then ahead, he saw the child again. The small figure knelt beside a shape on the ground. The stolen food was placed gently in front of someone lying weakly against the stone. Harris stopped, his breath caught in his throat. The shape on the ground was a woman nor something like it. Taller than the child, but thin, fragile, her skin dull and cracked. She looked like she had not eaten in weeks. Her chest rose and fell with painful effort. Her eyes barely opened, but when they did, they glowed faintly. The same as the child's. The child touched her face with trembling hands. It whispered something in its own language, words soft and broken. Harris could not understand, but he understood the meaning. It was comfort. It was love. And in that moment, everything changed. The theft was no longer a crime. It was an act of survival, an act of desperate hope. The child had not stolen for itself. It had stolen to keep its mother alive. Harris felt the weight of his humanity pressing on him. He was an explorer, a soldier, a survivor. But he was also something more. He was human, and humans, at their best, could never turn away from the weak, from the hungry, from the innocent. He stood there in the darkness, watching, his heart heavy with a decision that would change everything. The silence inside the stone passage was heavy. Captain Harris kept his light low, his eyes fixed on the frail mother and the alien child. For a long moment, he only stood there, hidden in the shadows, uncertain if he should step closer. The child pressed the stolen food into his mother's hands, urging her to eat. Her weak fingers trembled as she tried to hold it. Harris swallowed hard. A strange mixture of emotions stirred inside him: anger, pity, curiosity. The thief was just a starving boy. The mother was sick, almost broken. But this place, this cavern, felt wrong. Too quiet, too heavy, like the air itself was waiting for something. Then it happened. The child's head lifted suddenly. Its wide eyes glowed brighter in the dim light. It had sensed him. Harris froze, but it was too late. The child's gaze locked on him, and in the blink of an eye, the boy grabbed his mother's hand and tried to pull her deeper into the darkness. "Wait," Harris whispered. But the word echoed like a threat. The boy panicked. His small body moved with surprising speed, dragging the weak woman into a narrow tunnel. Harris stepped forward, instinct pulling him. He couldn't let them vanish. Not now. Not after he had followed this far. He ducked into the tunnel, his boots crunching on gravel. The passage was tight, the walls scraping his shoulders. His light flickered across jagged stone and glowing moss. The echoes of hurried steps rang ahead of him, the boy, guiding his mother, desperate to escape. It was no longer just a theft. It had become a chase. The tunnel twisted like a serpent. Harris pushed forward, his breath quick and sharp. Each corner promised a trap, each shadow a danger. Was the child leading him somewhere? To a nest of others? To an ambush? His human instincts screamed caution. But his heart whispered something else. They're running because they're afraid. The chase grew harder. The mother stumbled often, her coughing echoing through the stone. The child's small voice urged her on, though Harris couldn't understand the words. Still, the tone was clear fear mixed with love. He could almost feel the boy's heart pounding in his chest. Harris slowed his pace, careful not to sound like a predator. But he could not stop. His curiosity was stronger than his fear. Teeny needed answers. Why were they here? What had happened to their kind? The tunnel suddenly widened into a cavern. Strange crystals jutted from the walls, glowing faintly green. Pools of water reflected the light like glass. Harris stepped in carefully, scanning the space. There across the cavern, the boy hurried toward another opening, his mother leaning on him. Harris raised his hand. "Stop." His voice carried across the chamber. The child froze for a heartbeat, then pushed forward again. The mother stumbled, almost falling. Harris's chest tightened. They were not enemies. They were not threats. They were just survivors. But they didn't know him. To them, he was the alien. He stepped closer, lowering his light so it would not blind them. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said softly, though he knew they couldn't understand his words. The boy turned his head, eyes blazing with mistrust. Then he vanished into the tunnel beyond. Harris cursed under his breath and followed again. The cavern narrowed back into a passage, this one sloping downward. The air grew colder, heavier. Strange noises echoed distant growls, scraping stone. Harris's senses sharpened. The world down here was not empty. Something else lived in these tunnels. The child seemed to know the way. His small steps were fast, guiding his mother with practiced movements. Harris realized this was not their first time hiding here. They had lived in these shadows for some time. But from what? The slope grew steeper. Harris had to grip the walls to steady himself. Ahead, he heard the boy grunt, struggling to help his mother climb down a jagged drop. Harris's light flickered on them, her frail hands clinging, her breath ragged, her body trembling. For a second, Harris almost reached out to help. But the boy saw him and hissed, a sound like warning, protective, fierce. The child's thin frame shook, but his spirit burned like fire. Harris stepped back, raising his hands to show peace. Still, the boy dragged his mother further down, refusing to trust him. The chase continued, deeper and deeper. Harris began to lose track of direction. The tunnels twisted in endless patterns, like a maze carved by time itself. His instincts warned him. If he lost them, he might never find his way out. Yet he pressed on. Finally, the tunnels opened again. Harris stumbled into a vast underground chamber. The ceiling soared high, dotted with glowing veins of crystal. Stalactites dripped with faint blue water. The sound of rushing air filled the space. And then he saw them. The boy and his mother had stopped at the far side of the chamber. The mother had collapsed onto a flat rock, too weak to move. The boy knelt beside her, clutching her hand, his small body shaking. He looked back at Harris, his eyes full of fear, but also defiance. For the first time, Harris saw something more than desperation in those eyes. He saw a challenge, a warning. Stay back. She is mine to protect. Harris froze at the edge of the chamber, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The chase was over. But the story was not. He now stood at a line that would decide everything. Would he step forward as a threat? Or as something else? The boy's eyes never left him. The cavern echoed with silence, broken only by the mother's weak cough. Suspense hung like a blade in the air. Harris knew one truth. What he chose next would shape everything that followed. The underground chamber was silent except for the ragged cough of the alien woman and the faint dripping of water from the ceiling. Captain Harris stood at the edge, his light flickering across jagged crystal walls. The boy knelt close to his mother, his small hands clinging to her arm as if holding her to life itself. For a moment, nobody moved. The child's dark, glowing eyes stared at Harris with sharp mistrust. His thin chest rose and fell quickly, fear and anger mixing together. He looked fragile, yet in his face burned a fire stronger than hunger. Harris lowered his light, careful not to blind them. He raised one hand, open and calm. "Easy," he whispered, though he knew they could not understand his language. His voice was steady, softer than before. The boy hissed faintly, a warning sound, then pressed closer to his mother. She stirred, weakly, her lips parting. A faint sound slipped out, words in a tongue unknown, soft like a prayer. The boy answered her quickly, almost in tears, urging her to stay awake. Harris felt his chest tighten. He had seen soldiers die in battle. He had seen comrades fall in silence, but this was different. This was not war. This was survival, raw and pure. He took a slow step forward. The boy's body stiffened instantly. His small hands reached for a sharp piece of stone, holding it like a weapon. His arms shook, but his eyes held steady. Harris stopped. He respected the courage, a starving child, alone, yet still ready to fight for his mother. In that moment, Harris saw something familiar, something deeply human. He crouched low, trying not to look threatening. Carefully, he reached into his belt pouch and pulled out a second food pack. He held it out in the air, keeping his movements slow, deliberate. The boy's eyes darted between the glowing packet and Harris's face. Suspicion burned strong. For long seconds, nothing happened. Then the woman coughed again, weaker this time, her body trembling. That was enough. The boy dropped the stone and hurried to her side, holding her hand. But his eyes stayed locked on Harris, waiting to see what he would do. Harris placed the food pack gently on the ground. Then he stepped back, his palms open. The boy hesitated. His small frame trembled with doubt, torn between mistrust and hope. At last, he crawled forward, snatched the packet, and hurried back to his mother. He tore it open with desperate fingers, pressing the food into her hands. She struggled to eat, each bite slow and painful, but it brought color back to her cheeks. Faint and fragile, Harris exhaled, relief washing over him. He had chosen correctly, but his curiosity only grew. Why were they here? Where was the rest of their kind? Why was the woman so sick? He studied the cavern. Symbols carved into the walls caught his attention, strange markings etched deep into the stone, glowing faintly with moss. They were old, ancient even. Stories, maybe warnings. He could not read them, but he could feel their weight. This place was not just a shelter. It was a ruin, a remnant of something long lost. He stepped closer to the walls, brushing away dust. The carvings showed tall figures with glowing eyes, much like the boy and his mother. Rows of them, standing proud, holding staffs or blades. But then the images changed. Fire, falling towers, shadows of machines. The story turned from strength to ruin. Harris's brow furrowed. Was this their history? A once great people, now broken and scattered. He looked back at the boy and his mother. Maybe they were the last of them, clinging to life in the cracks of a dead world. The woman's weak gaze turned toward him. Her glowing eyes, dim but steady, locked on his. For a heartbeat, Harris felt as though she saw through him, past the armor, past the human shell, into his soul. She whispered again, faint words in her own tongue. The boy answered, nodding quickly. Then he looked at Harris and made a gesture, palm flat, pushing outward. A warning? A plea? Harris could not tell. He stayed where he was. He knew trust would not come easily. Suddenly, the ground shook. A distant rumble echoed through the tunnels. Dust fell from the ceiling. The boy's head snapped up, his eyes wide with fear. He grabbed his mother's hand tightly. She coughed again, struggling to sit upright. Harris tensed. He knew that sound. Movement, something big, something alive. The boy whispered urgently to his mother, then glanced at Harris. For the first time, there was no anger in his eyes, only fear. Fear that was bigger than mistrust. Fear that said, something worse is coming. Harris's instincts roared. His hand moved to the sidearm on his belt. The chase was over. The discovery had been made. And now a new danger was rising. The woman tried to stand, but collapsed again. The boy pulled at her arm, desperate, frantic. He looked back at Harris, as if torn between two choices: drive the human away or accept his help. Harris felt the weight of the moment. His pulse quickened. He had discovered the truth. They were not enemies. They were survivors, weak and hunted. But whatever shook the ground beneath them was not weak, and if it found them here, none of them might survive. The cavern trembled again. Harris's jaw tightened. He stepped closer, his voice low, steady, though he knew they did not understand. "You're not alone anymore." The boy stared at him, uncertain. The woman's eyes flickered with faint light. The rumble grew louder. Harris lifted his weapon, standing tall. Ready? The discovery was not just about who they were. It was about what hunted them, and it was coming. The rumbling in the cavern grew louder, rolling like thunder, trapped underground. Dust shook loose from the ceiling, falling in pale clouds. Captain Harris stood firm, his weapon raised, his jaw set. The alien boy clutched his mother's arm, his small body trembling. The glow of the crystals along the wall flickered as if the cave itself was afraid. The boy's wide eyes darted between Harris and the dark tunnel where the sound came from. His breathing was quick, almost panicked, but his grip on the weak woman never loosened. Harris's heart pounded. He had choices, and every choice could decide life or death. He could leave. He could climb back through the twisting tunnels and return to his wrecked shuttle. His supplies were low, but he could survive a few more days until rescue came. That was the smart choice, the safe choice. Or he could stay. He could try to protect the child and his mother. He didn't know what hunted them. He didn't know how strong it was, or how many there were. All he knew was that this family was too weak to survive alone. The boy looked at him again, his glowing eyes full of mistrust, but also something else. Something silent. A question. Will you fight for us, or will you abandon us like the others? Did Harris felt the weight of the stare? He remembered Earth. He remembered times in war when civilians begged soldiers for help. He remembered turning away because orders demanded it. He remembered faces, thin and desperate. Just like this boy's. Those memories had never left him. The rumble came again, closer now. A scraping sound joined its stone, grinding against stone, as if something huge dragged its body through the tunnels. The woman coughed violently, her thin frame shaking. The boy whispered to her, tears running down his pale cheeks. He tried to lift her, but she was too weak to stand. Harris could see the despair rising in the boy's eyes. That was the moment. Harris lowered his weapon slightly. He crouched down, spreading his hands to show no harm. His voice was calm, quiet, steady. "I'm not leaving you." They didn't understand the words, but tone mattered more than language. His voice carried a promise. The boy hesitated, then gave a tiny nod. Not of trust, not yet, but of need. A silent acceptance that, at this moment, he had no choice but to let the human stand beside him. Harris moved closer, carefully. He slid his weapon back into its holster and bent down toward the woman. Her glowing eyes lifted weakly to him, half closed. With exhaustion, he placed one arm under her back and another beneath her legs. Her body felt weightless, fragile as glass. The boy let out a warning sound, but he didn't stop Harris. He stayed close, watching every move. Harris lifted her gently. She coughed against his chest, her head resting weakly on his shoulder. The boy pressed close to her side, one hand on her arm, never letting go. The rumble shook the cavern again. Louder, closer. The air grew colder, carrying a foul stench, damp and metallic. Harris's soldier instincts sharpened. Whatever was coming was big, dangerous, and close. He looked at the boy. "We have to move." The boy didn't understand, but he seemed to sense it. He nodded quickly, pointing toward a narrow tunnel at the far side of the cavern. Harris adjusted the woman in his arms and followed. The tunnel was tight, the ceiling low. Harris moved as quickly as he could without stumbling, the boy guiding ahead with frantic urgency. Behind them, the scraping grew louder, echoing closer and closer. He wanted to look back, but he didn't. Every step forward was survival. The path sloped upward. Harris's arms burned from carrying the woman, but he did not stop. Her shallow breaths warmed his chest, a reminder that her life hung in his hands. The boy glanced back often, his glowing eyes wide with fear, urging Harris to keep moving. At last, the tunnel widened into another chamber, smaller, hidden, its ceiling dotted with faint blue moss. Here, the sound of the approaching creature grew distant, muffled by stone. Harris lowered the woman gently onto a flat rock. She coughed again, but her breathing steadied, faint and weak. The boy knelt beside her, clutching her hand tightly. Harris leaned back against the wall, sweat dripping from his brow. His muscles ached, his lungs burned, but his resolve hardened. He had made his choice. He would not abandon them. The boy looked up at him again, his mistrust still sharp but softened now by something near recognition. He knew Harris had carried her. He knew the human had not run away. For a long moment, their eyes met. In that silence, without words, a fragile bond formed. Then Harris looked down at the woman. He had seen injuries before, sickness, starvation. He could tell she was not dying from hunger alone. Something else drained her strengths, something deeper. He reached into his belt and pulled out his small med kit. Simple human medicine, limited supplies. It might not work on her kind. It might even do harm, but to do nothing was worse. He hesitated, staring at the fragile vials and bandages. This was the true decision. If he shared his medicine, he might not have enough for himself. If he risked it, he might waste what little he had left. But when he looked again at the boy, small, starving, clinging to hope, his doubt vanished. He opened the kit. The boy's eyes widened, watching every move. Harris worked slowly, carefully, showing the tools, showing his empty hands, letting the boy see he meant no harm. Then, gently, he pressed a small injector against the woman's arm. A hiss of medicine slipped under her skin. The boy gasped, but did not stop him. He only watched, his small hand gripping his mother's tighter. Minutes passed. The woman stirred faintly. Her breathing grew smoother, less broken. Harris exhaled, relief washing through him. It was working, at least for now. The boy's eyes glistened with tears. He looked at Harris again, not with anger this time, but with something close to wonder. The decision was made. Harris was no longer just an explorer. He was their protector. And deep in the tunnels, the rumble of the unseen beast rolled again. The danger was not gone. It was only waiting. The hidden chamber offered only a short rest. Captain Harris leaned against the wall, his muscles still aching from carrying the alien woman. The boy sat beside her, clutching her hand, whispering soft words in his strange language. Her breathing was steadier now, thanks to the human medicine. But her body still shook with weakness. Harris knew this was only a pause, not safety. The rumble that shook the larger cavern still echoed faintly through the stone. Whatever hunted them was still out there, searching. He opened his pack and counted what little he had. 2 food rations left, 1 small water purifier, a half-empty medical kit. Not enough, not for long. The boy's eyes flicked to the supplies and then back to Harris. Suspicion lingered in his stare, but also something else, to desperate hope. Harris felt the weight of that look. He was no longer fighting for just himself. Now their lives pressed heavy on his shoulders. The woman stirred weakly, her glowing eyes half open. She whispered something, her voice faint, like wind through broken glass. The boy leaned close, nodding quickly, answering her in a trembling voice. Then his gaze returned to Harris. He made a gesture hand to his mouth, then pointing upward. Harris understood. Food, he sighed. Yeah, I know, but food meant risk. Leaving the chamber meant facing whatever prowled the tunnels. He stared at his weapon, then at the narrow exit. His body told him to rest, but the hunger in the boy's face told him he couldn't. He rose to his feet. Stay with her, he said, though the boy wouldn't understand the words. His tone carried the meaning. He pointed to the woman, then mimed waiting. The boy nodded slowly, his grip on her hand tightening. Harris ducked into the tunnel again, his light casting sharp shadows across the stone. Every step echoed too loudly. He moved carefully, weapon drawn, listening for the scraping sound that had haunted them earlier. The tunnels stretched on, twisting like the veins of a dying world. Strange plants grew along the walls, glowing faintly, their tendrils reaching toward him. Some looked edible, but Harris did not trust them. He remembered the warnings from his survival training. Never eat alien life without testing. He couldn't risk poison. Not now. Further ahead, he found water dripping from a crack in the stone, gathering into a shallow pool. He crouched down, setting his purifier into the liquid. Clean water. A small victory. But as the device hummed, a low growl echoed through the tunnels. Harris froze. The sound came from the shadows beyond the pool. A heavy scrape followed, claws dragging against stone. His light flicked across the wall and there it was. A shape, massive and hunched eyes, glowing red in the dark. Its body was armored with jagged plates, its mouth filled with rows of sharp teeth. A predator, and it had caught his scent. Harris grabbed the purifier and backed away slowly, weapon raised. The creature stepped closer, its heavy body shaking. The ground, its growl deepened, vibrating in Harris's chest. Not today, Harris muttered. The beast lunged. Harris fired. The shot cracked through the tunnel, sparks flashing off the creature's armor. It roared, the sound deafening, and slammed into the wall, sending shards of stone flying. Harris fired again, aiming for its eyes. One shot struck true. The beast howled in pain, thrashing violently. Harris used the moment to run. His boots pounded against the stone, his breath sharp, his heart racing. The tunnel twisted, the growl chasing close behind. He could feel the creature's rage shaking the ground at last. He reached the chamber. The boy's eyes widened as Harris stumbled inside, clutching the purifier, weapon still smoking. The woman stirred at the noise, coughing. Weakly the boy rushed to Harris's side, his small hands tugging at his arm, urging him to hurry. Harris didn't need the words. He knew. The beast would not stop. He set the purifier down quickly, handing the boy the water. The child pressed it to his mother's lips, helping her drink in small sips. Relief softened her face, though her strength remained thin. Harris reloaded his weapon, his jaw tight. He had bought time, nothing more. The predator knew they were here. It would come again, and real food was still missing. He sat down heavily, running a hand over his face. His mind spun with choices. He could try to hunt smaller creatures in the tunnels, though he had seen none yet. He could risk the glowing plants, but the danger of poison was too high. He could even share the last of his human rations, though. It meant less for himself. His stomach tightened at the thought, but he knew the truth. Survival wasn't about comfort, it was about sacrifice. He opened one of his last packs and slid it toward the boy. The child blinked, staring at it, then at Harris. Slowly, carefully, he took it, opening it with clumsy fingers. He fed his mother. First, then ate, only after she swallowed. Harris watched silently. Respect stirred in him. Even starving, the boy gave before he took. That fire of loyalty, that spirit of love, felt more human than many men Harris had known. The rumble echoed. Again, deeper now. The beast was moving closer. Harris tightened his grip on his weapon. This was the struggle, not just against hunger, not just against sickness, but against the darkness itself. A battle of choices, of sacrifices. He looked at the boy and his mother. Fragile, but alive. He looked at the shadows of the tunnel, where glowing red eyes might soon appear. He whispered to himself, steady and firm. Then we fight. The struggle had only begun. The chamber was quiet again, though the silence was uneasy. The growl of the beast had faded into the deeper tunnels, but Captain Harris knew it had not left. Predators didn't give up. They waited. They circled. They hunted. For now, there was a fragile peace. Harris sat near the entrance, weapon across his knees, his eyes scanning the shadows. The boy stayed close to his mother, feeding her the last crumbs of the ration pack. She chewed slowly, weakly, but some strength had returned to her pale face. Her glowing eyes flickered open more often now, watching both her son and Harris. The boy never let go of her hand. His small fingers clung tightly, as though he feared she would vanish if he released her even for a second. Harris felt the weight of their bond. It reminded him of something long-buried memories of his own childhood, of holding his sister's hand when bombs fell on their city back on Earth. Fear had been heavy then, too. But the bond between siblings had been stronger than fear. Now, he saw the same fire in this boy, and he respected it. Slowly, Harris reached into his pack and pulled out a small metal cylinder. He twisted it open, revealing a faint flame inside a survival stove. He set it on the ground and fed it a piece of dried fuel. The blue flame grew steadier, glowing against the stone walls. The boy's eyes widened, watching the light. He pointed, whispered to his mother. She coughed softly, a sound that might have been approval. Harris smiled faintly. He pulled out a small strip of dried ration, placed it above the flame. The smell of warm food filled the air, simple but comforting. The boy's stomach growled loud enough to echo. He froze, embarrassed, but Harris chuckled. Softly, "Yeah, I know that feeling." The words meant nothing, but tone meant everything. Harris tore the strip in two, offering half to the boy. He hesitated, glancing at his mother first. Then, when she gave a faint nod, he accepted it with both hands. He sniffed it, then nibbled. His face brightened faintly, surprise flickering in his eyes at the taste. For the first time, he looked at Harris, not with fear, but with something new, gratitude. It was small, but it was the beginning. They ate in silence, the blue flame crackling softly. The boy sat closer now, still cautious, but not as distant. Harris noticed how his shoulders had relaxed, even just a little. The woman whispered again, her weak voice carrying words Harris couldn't understand. The boy listened carefully, then turned to Harris. He made a gesture, touching his chest, then pointing at the human. A name. She had asked his name. Harris tapped his chest. Harris, a T, said it slow, clear. Then he pointed at the boy. The child blinked, surprised. He hesitated, then pressed his small hand against his chest. Cale. Harris repeated it, careful. Cale. The boy nodded quickly, almost proudly. He pointed to his mother, her glowing eyes half closed. Sarah. Harris bowed his head slightly in respect. Sarah, for the first time since the theft, there were names. They were no longer just strangers. They were Harris, Cale, and Sarah. The bond grew stronger with that simple exchange, but the world did not allow peace for long. A faint scrape echoed. Through the tunnels, Harris's smile faded. He rose to his feet instantly, weapon in hand. The boy tensed, clutching his mother tighter. The growl did not come this time, only the sound of movement, slow and patient. The predator was still searching. Harris stood at the entrance, his eyes fixed on the darkness beyond. His finger rested against the trigger. But the beast did not show itself. The scraping faded again, swallowed by silence. He lowered the weapon, but his jaw stayed tight. "It's not done with us," he muttered. When he turned back, Cale was watching him with wide, serious eyes. The boy made a gesture, clawing at the air, then striking downward. He was asking, "Will you fight it?" Harris nodded once, firm. "If it comes, we fight." Cale stared at him, then slowly mimicked the motion. His small fist clenched, striking downward in the air. His face was still young, still frightened. But behind the fear was courage. Harris felt something stir in his chest. Pride, respect. This boy had fire in him. Fire that reminded Harris of humanity itself. As the night tore, what counted as night. In this strange world past, the three of them stayed close to the small flame. Harris kept watch, his eyes sharp. Cale dozed lightly against his mother's side, waking often to check her breathing. Sierra slept, her chest rising and falling slowly. The medicine seemed to be helping. Harris hoped it would last hours later. Cale stirred again. He crawled closer to Harris, hesitant, then held out a small carved stone. It was rough, uneven, etched with simple lines of figure with glowing eyes. He pressed it into Harris's hand, then pointed at his mother, then at himself. A gift. A simple dot. Harris closed his fingers around it. The stone was warm from the boy's hand. Ah. He looked at Cale and nodded deeply. "Thank you." Cale's lips curved into the faintest smile. The bond was real now. Stronger than mistrust. Stronger than fear. But outside the chamber, in the endless tunnels, the beast still prowled. The silence was not safety. It was only waiting, and Harris knew the bond they had built would soon be tested by fire. The little flame had burned low. Captain Harris checked the tunnel again, weapon steady, breath slow. Cale sat beside Sierra, rubbing her hands to keep them warm. Her eyes were clearer now, but her strength was still thin. The silence broke. A new sound rolled through the rock deeper than before, closer, heavier. Not only scraping. A pulse. A slow, steady thump like a metal heart waking. Harris looked. Back at the carvings on the wall. Warriors, towers, machines. His eyes narrowed. He remembered the red glow in the beast's eyes and the jagged armor. Maybe this thing wasn't a simple animal at all. Another pulse. The walls shook. Dust drifted. Down like ash. Cale stared at Harris, fear sharp in his eyes. He lifted his small fist and mimed to strike again. Fight, maybe. Harris whispered, "Oh, we need more than bullets." He slid his light across the carvings, searching for shapes he had missed before. There under a row of tall figures was a small circle with lines around it. I got it. It looked like a wheel or a lock. He moved closer, brushed off the moss, and found a thin slit in the stone. A keyhole. Harris turned to Cale. He pointed at the slit. Then at Sierra's small necklace and old chain with a flat black chip hanging from it. He had noticed it earlier, but thought nothing of it. Now he wasn't so sure. Cale frowned, confused. Sierra's hand rose weakly to the charm. Her eyes flickered toward the wall. She knew. Cale reached for it, looked to Harris for permission, then gently removed the charm. He held it with both hands like a sacred thing. Harris guided him to the slit in the wall. The charm was not a perfect fit, but when Cale pressed it, the stone hummed. The chamber lights brightened. Blue veins in the ceiling flared. The air grew. Warmer? Sierra whispered a soft word, most a song. Cale answered with a broken version of the same word. A name, perhaps. Not a person. A place. A legacy. The hum rose. The circle turned deep inside the wall. Gears moved. A hidden panel slid aside and revealed a narrow pedestal with a crystal core mounted on top. It pulsed gently, like a calm heartbeat. Harris reached toward it and stopped. The hum changed, higher now, like a warning. Sira lifted her hand. She pointed at the crystal and then to her throat. Sing. Her strength was weak, but her voice was old. She drew breath and let out a soft, clear, tone-wan note. Then two. Then a slow line that was simple but precise. The crystal answered, glowing. Brighter with each note. The hum became smooth. The rock behind them shook as a roar blasted through the tunnel. The predator, closer than ever. Harris's mind raced. The beast hunted by sound and heat. The stove, their voices, his weapon fire. But the crystal's hum, it vibrated through the stone like a beacon. Maybe it was never a beast's lair. Maybe it was a guardian path, an old defense route tied to the ruins. Cale, Harris said, gently, pointing to the stove. The boy understood fast. He smothered the flame. Darkness wrapped the chamber, except for the crystal's glow. The roar came again right outside. Harris stepped between the doorway and Sira. He raised his weapon. The crystal pulsed in time with Sira's faint song. Ah. The hum reached the tunnel. Okay, and the red glow appeared. The beast's armored head pushed through the dark eyes like coals, teeth like knives. It paused. The hum touched it. The eyes flickered. The beast tilted its head, confused for the first time. Harris fired once, at the ceiling this time. Stone crashed down between them, blocking most of the opening. The beast roared, smashing the rock aside with its plated shoulder. It would be through in seconds. Sira sang again stronger, as if the crystal fed her voice. Cale added a thin echo, trying to match her pitch. The crystal brightened, sending a steady tone through the chamber. And the beast stopped. Its armor plates shifted. The red eyes turned to amber. It scanned the room, then lowered its head. Fraction, like a machine waiting for orders. Harris stared, stunned. You're not a hunter, he breathed. You're a guard dog. Sira lay back, exhausted. Her eyes moved to Harris, then to the pedestal. She tapped her chest weakly and pushed the pendant toward him again. He understood. She was giving him the right to command a tat, at least for now. Cale, Harris said softly, taking the charm. He pointed at the beast, then at the upper tunnel, the way out. The boy swallowed and nodded. Harris stepped forward and lifted the pendant. He touched it to the pedestal again. The hum shifted to a new tone, low, firm, direct. He took a risk and spoke as if the machine could understand his intent. Guide, protect. The beast lifted its head. The amber eyes steadied. It turned from the chamber and faced the tunnel, body tense, listening. Then it moved, slow and heavy, into the corridor. Clearing debris with its armored shoulder, Sira closed her eyes, a faint smile touching her lips. Cale squeezed her hand, then stood, shoulders straighter than before. Time to go, Harris said. He lifted Sira once more. She was still weak, but she was lighter now with relief. Cale walked beside them, one hand always on his mother's arm. They followed the beast. It moved ahead in careful steps, halting when danger echoed, pushing through. When the path was blocked, where the tunnels crossed, it chose the dry route away from collapsing rock. Where the air split, it followed the faint current upward. An hour passed, maybe two. Time was thin down here at last. A pale light appeared ahead, real light, not crystal glow. The tunnel opened onto a wide canyon. Wind pressed cool air against their faces. Harris set Sira down on a flat stone. She smiled at him, weak but warm. Kale looked from the sky to Harris, and then back to his mother, his eyes bright with something new. Behind them, the beast stood at the mouth of the tunnel. Eyes still amber, body still as a statue. Guarding? Waiting, Harris raised a pendant. "Stand," he said softly. "Hold this path." The beast lowered its head as if accepting the order. Harris looked up at the broken clouds and the pale moons. Somewhere out there, his rescue beacon still pinged. He reached into his pack, pulled out the transmitter, and set it higher on a rock. Signal strength climbed. He turned to Kale and Sierra. "I'll call help," he said, tapping his chest, then pointing to the sky. "And when it comes, you come with me?" Kale stared at him, tears filling his eyes. He nodded once, hard. Sierra touched Harris's arm with trembling fingers. One word left her lips, clear despite her weakness: human. Harris smiled. "Human," he answered, and then tapped his heart. "Friend," in the canyon wind, the pendant warmed in his palm. In the shadow of the old world, among ruins and machines and the last of a proud people, a new promise began. Not to conquer, not to claim, but to protect. HFY, in its simplest truth. Humans don't walk away. They stay. They carry. They fight for the small and the weak until the sky opens again. And when the rescue ship finally broke the clouds, the beast still stood at the gate, amber-eyed and loyal, holding the path for the last of its makers and for the human who chose to be more than a survivor.